introduce people and let's go, right?
Yes. I'm hitting
All right.
the button. I believe we are live. Audience, how do we sound?
Hello, audience.
Take
Welcome
it away,
everyone to today's Kubernetes office hours. I'm Dan Pop. I have my esteemed panel here. We're going to introduce in a second. We're going to answer your user questions live on the air with our esteemed panel of experts. You can find us in office hours on Slack. That's pound office hours on Slack, and check the topic for the URL for the information. So there's a pinned topic here. Before we begin, let's start by introducing ourselves. Around the horn. Who wants to go first?
I'm Chauncey Thorne from Phase 2. I'm a Kubernetes administrator. Thank you. Looking forward for today.
Hey everybody, my name is Mario Loria. I am a DevOps engineer at Carta, specializing in everything from Kubernetes to developer experience and everything in between. So nice to be here today.
All right, I am David Mackay. I'm a developer advocate for Equinix Battle based in Scotland, Glasgow to be specific. I'm a new CNCF ambassador, and I'm happy to take questions.
My name's Chris. I'm a customer engineer with Google Cloud Canada's public sector team. I'm based out of Ottawa, Ontario. Background has been mostly in on-prem Kubernetes, but now I'm focusing more on the cloud space. Which is
Your mic is up.
Yeah, Chris, can you check your mic real quick?
My mic is up.
There it is.
I promise I've done this before. Off to a good start. Yeah, so I'm Chris, customer engineer for Google Cloud Canada public sector. Background's primarily in on-prem government Kubernetes, but now I focus on cloud government Kubernetes, which is a lot of fun.
George, you want to introduce yourself before we go here?
Yeah, and I'm George Castro. I'm the former host of the show, kind of helping Dan and David figure out the ropes. And you can find me in the Kubeflow community.
And I'm Dan Pop. I'm Chris Carty's executive assistant. So let's kick this off. Let's go. Let's make this rain. All right. Before we start, here are the ground rules. This is a Kubernetes event, so the code of conduct is in effect. So please be excellent to each other. This is a judgment-free zone. Everyone had to start from somewhere. So please help out your buddy by having a supportive environment, not only in this channel, but also in life. While we do our best to answer your questions in the panel, we don't have access to your cluster. So like live debugging is probably off topic, but we'll do our best to help you get started and get moving. Normally we provide shirts. However, the CNCF store is replenishing its inventory. We'll give you a shout out in our undying devotion. I mean, what more could you want? Mario Loria just being devoted to you is pretty awesome, right? Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on answers with your experiences and pro tips. Audience, you can help by pasting in URLs to official docs if you hear something that you know and you can answer, or anything that you think that might be relevant to the topic at hand. Post your questions on discuss.kubernetes.io. You can always help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, and paying it forward. And by the way, this panel is made entirely of volunteers. If you want to come up here and hang out with us and on monthly and answer some questions, let us know. We'd love to have new people rotate in and out. I mean, we had steering committee co-chairs on this panel, for God's sakes. It's that's how people start. You got to start getting involved here. So with that said, panel, are we ready for our first question? You all pumped? Let's go. All right.
Let's bring it.
First up, Andrew, we're writing a controller with controller runtime and trying to use the generation observed generation pattern to avoid reconciling if there's any change, not using the predicate provided by the controller runtime for the purpose yet though. My question is, how could that work with the possibility of stale cache? When we write the observed generations to the status of our CAR, it triggers another reconcile immediately. In some cases, the cache is stale and the CR is get still has the old status, and therefore the old observed generation. What is the recommended strategy with dealing with this?
I've never dealt with writing my own controller, so I'm going to sidestep this one.
Yep. I've just started playing around with the controllers and hadn't ran across this particular problem.
All right. So do we want to move on to the next question?
Nobody has any idea at all? Anybody in the audience have a tip? I don't want to give up so easily.
Yeah, I've not run a lot of controllers either, but hopefully someone watching has, and I know a few people that I'll ping that question to as well. So if we don't get an answer within the next hour, we will try and get back to you in the coming days.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
just
a good
having
rem-
that a good thing is like, again, working, if this panel doesn't know it, at least use the office hours so we can keep it in static place, so then folks can respond at a certain point.
Yeah, I was gonna say just hang out in the channel. Usually, if we can't answer something, we will find someone to come hop in.
All righty, we're ready for the next question, panel. All right. Simone Baracci asked, I'm adding the Italian touch here. I'd like to configure my small cluster as highly available with the no single master, single point of failure, and make the best use of all the cluster resources. My current plan is to make 3 nodes run as masters and be able to schedule pods on the masters. From my research, the issues in doing this are security issues, pods competing, and I'm not concerned about security at the moment. I can think of limiting the max number of pod resources. Is there any red flag in doing so? Panel, question's yours.
So just if I summarize that in one sentence, right? This person is asking, they want to run workloads on their master nodes, right? And what would the challenges be there? Anyone have any thoughts?
I think my initial. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. You can go, Mario.
I was just gonna say my initial reaction is like annotations, labels, taints and tolerations, those sorts of things in terms of, control plane nodes are very much geared for control plane workloads, and worker nodes are very much geared for worker workloads, if you will. So you're gonna have to get through some of that, but I think it is possible. I don't know if I would recommend it, although it sounds like this is more of a testing environment, et cetera. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was just thinking there's, I can't remember if it's by default now or not, but you can set reserved resources for the control plane components. So if you're worried about things being, or workloads trouncing your control plane elements, having that set will help protect those, and then it'll just be your workloads that get fudged. But again, like if it's not a production environment, or if you're not running super sensitive data in there, it shouldn't be a problem. Just make sure your nodes are big enough.
Yeah, I think the key statement there is it's a non-production workload, because you expose yourself to potential security issues with, pods that are running in potential privilege mode, et cetera. They could escape out and get access to etcd, and that's not something that you really want in that particular context. If you have 3 nodes that you're running as master, it seems as though that your infra is in a state to where you don't necessarily need to have, any applications running on those nodes, et cetera.
So we want to take the next. Want to take the next question?
Wait, can I add a follow up while we're in here? Can we add in just a question for the panel? What about etcd? When do you all decide whether it's to run it along with all of the other control plane elements, or when to split it off into its own cluster? Is that like really high end, or is there like a rule of thumb?
I say that's like, you got a lot of resources you can spare to do that. I mean, that's separation of duties. That's great, but not everyone has the resources to handle that. Right,
because I think control plane stuff, etcd, and workloads, right? Like there's 3 ways you could split that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think long term, it depends on your scale. I think you have to grow into it. I know at StockX, we started with etcd and cluster managed for us. And then we eventually had to grow out of it. You can tell when it's just time, I think. There isn't a 100 pods sort of thing that you can just say when you hit this number.
Gotcha.
You have to think about it long term as well. If you want to plan for scale, something you should do up front. So.
All righty, keeping us going here. Who wants to kind of read the next question and take it here? I'm kind of playing lazy host at this point.
Want me to take it? Jesper asks, is it possible to limit a service account to only have rights to create, edit, and delete custom resource definitions that are related to a certain namespace? Since CRDs are not namespace, I only see the option to give my service account rights to create, edit, and delete all CRDs on the cluster. For the system we are creating, we do not see this as secure and would like to know if there's a way to limit our service account. Great question.
So one of my colleagues actually seen that in the Slack and sent me their answer. So I guess I'll read out what they're saying, and then we
Yeah,
can maybe
and
add a
paste
little
in
bit
the
of
link
flavor
too.
that.
Audience, if you've got links to this stuff, start whacking them in there, and we'll shove them all in the show notes. It really helps out.
All right. So Marcus Johansson from Equinix Metal has said that the user can be scoped to create the custom resource instance of the resource defined by the CRD in a specific namespace. So that's using a role and not a cluster role. The user would need a cluster role to create the CRDs, which are cluster scoped, not namespaced. So hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Alrighty, next question from Kay Nabin. I'm planning to install Falco on AWS nodes. What's the best way to bring them up using the auto scaling or adding new nodes to the pool? So it can be installed as a daemon set, right? So basically, from that perspective, it would be installed on everything that's being deployed in said daemon set. So that could be a method. Or we've seen some customers, again, I see the question if it's plain vanilla, just EC2 hosts running it, or EKS. We see customers also just like embedded in some type of AMI. So then that would be the one that they would have there, because you can also install it as a systemd, a daemon set or daemon process there. So that could be a method for doing it. And from an EKS perspective, again, the Helm chart, anytime you spin up something, it will be just available there. So that's my unabashed answer there. But I would ask you to also join the Falco channel if you have more questions.
Things though, the daemon set would be the better pattern to avoid having to inject it into the AMI for the node that's being provisioned.
I guess the tricky bit there is that Falco can be run using a kernel module. And I guess the tricky bit is, you have to bake the kernel module into the AMI or do something in a user data script. EKS, that will get a little bit difficult. I think Falco has a way to run without that driver. I'm sure Pop can.
It taps into eBPF functions, right? So like basically, those are things we tap into. So like you can basically use it eBPF without the kernel mod. So that's kind of the method that I would suggest there.
I just wanted to add really quick, because I have done auto scaling on EKS with multiple daemon sets, that you don't have to do anything extra. Deploy the daemon set, new nodes, when they come up, they'll get the workload. It's that easy. No local DNS, Datadog, Nginx. We had multiple daemon sets, and there was some prioritization that we did a little bit here and there in terms of what happens when the node is coming into compute restraints and things like that. But for the most part, it should just work. And a daemon set, Helm chart, whatever, that's more the Kubernetes native way to do it. So yeah, for sure.
All right.
I'll read the next question then. Did I take it?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm here. All right. What are the general areas? This question is from Ram. What are the general areas that Kubernetes security is working on? Is anyone close to SIG security and know what's going on over there?
There's a ton. So I'm in there, and one of the things I'll say is, like, some of the best practices around, folks just like, doing things there. There's also a group that Tabby Sable and Ian Coldwater run in terms of just overall, Kubernetes security, like things that are going on with, like, deprecation of PSPs, all of those types of things. Great group to join to understand exactly what's going on there. They're coming up with, like, again, what the methodologies are for, like, for instance, like, processes for like rootless and all of these other fun things that we have going down the pike. So like there's a ton going on. I would absolutely recommend you join that Kubernetes security group, and I'll find a link to the channel as well. All right.
Anyone got anything else they want to add to that?
I'll find the links and stuff. You just shout them out.
Okay.
I was trying to find the links to the two enhancement proposals for PSPs that have been put forth.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about maybe some of the more recent changes then, if we want to talk about that. Wasn't the security context changes all moved out recently? Anyone familiar with them from 119 and 120? Nope.
Security context got changed? Did I miss that?
Pod security. policies being
Yeah.
deprecated.
Yeah. That's the thing we talked about in the beginning, and that's something. If you join that channel, it's still being discussed on how, how that's going to be messaged out, like what the actual methodology is going to be, and all that. I think that's a very, very good discussion. So making sure that anybody that's involved has a kind of say and understands what's going on is why that group is there. Because again, there's a SIG security for the CNCF, and then there's a Kubernetes security group that's specific to Kubernetes, and it's awesome. It's in the weeds. The Tabby and any in that group is doing a phenomenal job.
I'm not exactly sure if the CKS would classify into this, but they are trying to ensure that individuals, have the actual domain knowledge, so they're certifying people.
And that's the other part of this too, is there's going to be things like, as a CNCF project as Kubernetes is, there's certain things like, vulnerability assessments that are done and all of that. There's, if you're joining the contribution, I know that there was a release discussion on certain things where certain dependencies might be vulnerable and those types of things. And so they were working out how those things would be addressed. Perfect thing for somebody that is looking to just expand on their security practice within Kubernetes and provide, if they're a pen tester or something like this, might be a useful place for them to join, whatever is Kubernetes security, CNCF security, to be able to make sure that Kubernetes is a extremely secure place, which it is. There's a lot of things that you can do, obviously, that people have baked in to make it as secure as it can be.
Since you brought up, anyone take the CKS yet, or planning on it, or studying for it? Same question to the channel, if any of you are working on it. Just kind of
Currently
interested.
studying for it.
Studying for it. I think Borko, who's a hangout on the channel, he just got his. Sorry to put you on the spot, buddy.
Oh, Borko passed it. Congratulations.
Yeah. Shameless plug for somebody who's awesome is Sayama. Wrote an amazing Gumroad book. It literally from CKS, and he's awesome. So he basically laid out all of what the things you study for, and taps it right back into the topics that are in on the docs.
Pavel
really
passed
amazing.
It. All right.
Yeah.
And Kanabin took it January 2021. Yeah, if you could just type in what you feel about the test, do you feel it's because the CKA and CCAD, we get a lot of questions on those, so I'm just really interested in those. Feel free to inline your little certificate too, so we can say what a great job you did. All right, you can move on to the next question.
Just a quick plug for the Ottawa Kubernetes meetup. We had a talk yesterday on CKS. So when that YouTube link is up, I can drop it into the link, or drop it into the Slack.
Do you have a link to that book, Dan, when you get a chance?
Yeah, just put it in the office hours channel.
Ah, perfect. Thanks.
I was silent. Yeah, doors. Alrighty. What do we got next here?
I got a question over Twitter DMs that's kind of related to the last one, but I'm not sure if we answered it in passing or not. So I'll just ask it explicitly, and we'll see if there's anything we want to drop in there. But Bala reached out and just asked, with PSPs being deprecated, what are my alternatives?
OpenPA with Gateway and/or Caverno. Caverno.
Caverno, yeah.
Caverno, yes.
Yeah, I think those are the two most popular options: Open Policy Agent and Caverno. I'll plug myself here just while I'm not here, but I actually have a live stream with two members of the Caverno team on tomorrow night. There we go, 5 p.m. GMT. That's at rockwood.live.
All right. Should I get to the Ankit question? Ankit has a question. Did we? Yeah.
Yeah. There's follow-up in the channel as well, so you're gonna have to read some of that backlog.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of lost the channel here. I'm sorry. So basically, you mentioned that you said some folks passed it. So Pavel passed it. Borko passed it. Nabin passed it. Relcode's too scared to take it. We have the book in the channel for the CKS scenarios. Environment's a bit buggy, is what Borko says. And then it looks like Nabin wrote some notes. It looks like they're talking about OPPA and Gatekeeper. Shout out to Waleed. Absolutely great resource.
I added that link. He's great. I
mean, just in general. I mean. you know, Waleed's, not even just for the CKS. I mean, the CKA and CKA, when I got my CKA, without a doubt, like his links were fantastic. So
yeah, that last link I just put in the channel, CKS people, that's the one you want right there.
Yep. Yeah, and then Borko just put the comparisons between OPPA Gatekeeper versus Caverno. This is again really cool kind of tech, and those are things I think they're also getting discussed in that Kubernetes security group that I talked about as options for the deprecation of PSP. Alrighty, I think we're through the backlog. Let's get through some more questions here. So Ankit asks, when I delete PVs, retention policy and retain, PVs remain in the system, which is expected. When I delete that PV, I expect the underlying volume to be deleted on the cloud provider, but that doesn't happen. So does that mean that one has to manually go and clean up the volumes which remain in the cloud due to the behavior, or to take otherwise is to increase the unnecessary costs? I wish to create a feature set to enable deletion of underlying volume on deletion of PVs. What are your thoughts on this? Am I missing something here? I'm on EKS. This is an interesting thing because I think, my thought, I just want to throw something out there. Like I think cloud providers also like almost want to fail safe because it's like a block storage method, like for them to like an EBS block or something like, a Google block or something like this, where maybe they want to retain that, the customer may want to retain that data. So like there might be less liability if something gets deleted, even though I don't know, I'm just literally conjecture at this point, I get, but if that's something you aim to do, maybe there's kind of a thought process. If anybody's in the channel from like a cloud provider has thoughts on that, I think that's actually a very legitimate thing. Because if I delete my GKE cluster, there is remnant there. If like I've chosen like a specific set of storage or something like this. So that might be, I don't know if maybe that's a feature versus a limitation.
Yeah, I'm going to try that this afternoon. Now, I haven't come into this scenario that I'm aware of yet. The other thing I was thinking, click in my mind is maybe the retention policy set is to, retain, so it bypasses things. Borko was also mentioning here in the chat that
the IAM policies.
Policy.
Yeah, even for Google and both, I was thinking that as well. It could be like just you don't have, and if this is your personal account, or if this is like a corporate account where it's basically you only have a set amount of rules to be able to create and not delete. Like I've seen that as well. So yeah, it's an awesome response there.
Yeah, I think there's also
the other question.
Reclaim policy on the storage class as well. So if that's configured differently from the PVC, the actual claim, then it may be retained that way as well. So you need to double check that.
And I don't know if you're also using some type of like storage provider there. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask what storage provider they're using, so you're going down that path.
We've done this too many times together, Cardi. Well, I'm executive assistant. I know what you're thinking, dude. All righty, Ankit. I'm sorry, David. Did you have anything else to add to that, or we can go on to the next one?
Yeah, double check the storage class. I think that's all you can do right now. Yeah, let's move on to the next one.
Yes, sir. All right, I'm completely new to this and investigating if it's worthwhile for my company to move to Kubernetes. We run several smaller websites. Some of them get a lot of traffic after a social media post. My concern is abstracting the manual provisioning of VMs because it's burdensome to document the configuration. I would be easier with containers. And no general advice, it's worth moving to K8s. One quick thing. Giant Swarm did an awesome thing. You might want to check out. They like how to talk through how to basically convince like your VP on why you should use Kubernetes. I thought it was very good. So shout out to Giant Swarm. See if I can find a link to that.
Got it.
So cool. I just want to mention working in e-commerce. I think using Kubernetes for us was pivotal to how we handled scale. We're talking about a marketing push to millions of people in the scope of 5 minutes. We're talking about really learning HPA, having cluster autoscaler as well, and even building our own proactive autoscaler that would kind of get a marketing feed for when these sorts of pushes were planned and then scale based on that. I mean, this is, I left a few months ago. I'm not sure what they've done kind of since then, but I can say like a lot of it was very mechanical and tactical. It's getting a lot better. There's tools like Kata out there that are in the CNCF that are providing a lot more facilities for auto scaling on. I think if you're using virtual machines right now, you could, if you're in AWS, you can do auto scaling groups and get pretty far. But I think in terms of the life cycle and overall management of things, Kubernetes is going to be a lot easier, a lot more lower level in terms of you're running containers, you're not worried about VMs. The application itself is spawning instances, scaling instances, readiness probes, right? Dialing a lot of those things in can help verify that it's not just that you have an instance, but that instance actually can do its job properly 100% and service a request and return to 200, et cetera. Also, load balancing plays into this as well. You have a lot more control and options. I'm going to actually link something called Captain. Captain, I don't know exactly how it's said, but if I was doing it again, a lot of what we did, we used Datadog, but a lot of what we didn't get was the loop back. So what happens after the event has occurred and scale has been increased, and we now have 75 instances instead of 45 instances? How are we looking? What's our SLAs? Right. And so what are those SLIs that we're going to keep looking at, keep maintaining and reporting upstream? And how do we view those in a cohesive way? So great question. I could talk about this all day. So thanks.
One other company in terms of SLO and service level objective is, and I'm going to mention them, is Noble 9. I saw their demo when they were stealth, and I thought it's just a fantastic thing. And you got like Alex Hidalgo, you got like really heavy hitters in terms of understanding SRA and functions and all of that. So not only we Captain, but another one is exactly what you said. It's not so much looking at metrics and it's having that observability across your stack of what's going on and be able to have objectives for all of those metrics is, to me, is kind of a macro of the data that you're picking up. So it's really cool stuff.
I would say if your application is already in a Docker container, moving to Kubernetes is going to be, a little easier for you. It allows you to get better utilization of your VMs by, managing memory and all that stuff better and resources. So moving to that environment is a good thing. However, having in-house skills or someone to manage it, if you're going to try to manage the full control plane, or is this a managed service? But it sounds like this is in-house. So I would think through it and make sure that this is what you want to do. And then once you get there, you put yourself in a position to where you can pretty much run in any Kubernetes environment, Azure, DigitalOcean, et cetera, et cetera.
Or wherever from the business perspective, wherever the resources are going to be less cost prohibitive, right? So Equinix Metal or whatever it might be.
Yep. And also say Kubernetes kind of leads to not having a lot of vendor lock-in going forward once you adopt it, because you're pretty much subjected to the cloud provider's API. The difference is there, but you can still run pretty much anywhere.
I'd just like to add one thing. Just take into consideration, the amount of state in the app, and sometimes what it's written in is important, right? If you have an older Java app that doesn't behave well in containers and is very stateful, that is a totally different, way of approaching it than if you had, some PHP web front ends or something like that. So just something to take into account. I know in the show in the past, especially with older Java versions, there were issues with the killer and containers and stuff, and it got a little hairy. But all that stuff's getting better. But just something to remember is, memory consumption, what the platform is, all of that good stuff.
Chauncey's continuing this streak of heavy hitting answers. So here we go. Next up, if there's any tools for finding and deleting dangled RBAC rules in Kubernetes, mainly on-prem.
I'm not aware of any tools for that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it either. You can do get roles or role bindings -a just to get a list of everything that's in a particular namespace, et cetera. If your infra was produced through infrastructure as code, you more than likely don't have this problem, because when you undo something, it's going to remove all of the components associated with it, or deploying things with Helm charts will remove everything and reduce the drift also.
So any startups out there watching this, there's your $1 billion idea. You're welcome. Alrighty. Next up, do we have? Let me see in the channel. Is there anybody? We're still talking through some of the SLO functions here. All right. And
Yeah. This is the last queued up. So if anybody has new questions, now's the chance to add them while we get to this next one. Also looks like Brian Davis has some tools in this space if you want to check these out real quick. Or we can come back to this one.
Yeah, let's come back. I mean, we didn't answer, so maybe it was good ideas. Like, yeah, so Brian, awesome. See that you have, Cornelius and Arrakis, RBAC lookup. Awesome. Thank you for responding, Brian. We appreciate it. All righty. All right, so the question for the panel here is, hello, I would like to ask if containers are started in order they are written in a stateful set manifest file.
The answer is no. The containers, there's no guarantees in the order the containers will be started. Init containers are ordered. I think that was part of the question. But once you hit the actual non-init containers, it's completely random.
Now,
All right.
now if it's multiple replicas, they start up in orders. Like 0 is going to start before 1 completes, etc. So that pattern there. But as far as if it has an init container, that will get triggered start first, and then all other containers within it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So it's also something to be careful with stateful sets. If you've got the ordering guarantee set to ordered, then you can't actually start 3 if 1 is down. So they have to go 0, 1, 2, and so forth. The init container is worth noting that if any init container fails, the normal containers will never start, and if any init container is failing, no subsequent init containers will start. But once you get to the container section, it's completely random.
I just learned that today. Awesome.
Yeah, it's a good way to overload the init containers to do certain checks on your application, because they'll never proceed in order, especially around DB migrations and things like that. A really common source of frustration for people adopting Kubernetes. Yeah. You can also in the stateful set the guarantee to be parallel, so you can have the stateful set pods all start roughly at the same time, but there's no ordering guarantees if you're not using ordered.
Alrighty, there was a question in the channel about GPU by multiple pods. Somebody asked, and it looks like Allison responded. Thank you very much, Allison.
Yeah, let's read that so we have it on the video.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. How can I use a GPU by multiple pods, i.e. request fraction of a GPU from a pod? Allison responded in the channel with a couple of links for a GPU share device plugin, as well as GPU share schedule extender. And also explained how on nodes with NVIDIA Docker 2 and NVIDIA drivers, you can install the scheduler, allowed you to configure GPU sharing in your YAMLs.
In your YAMLs.
Awesome. In your YAMLs.
I didn't even know you could. I didn't know you could do this at all.
Which, if you think about it, wouldn't that be awesome for, I don't know, like a kubeflow type of function where you're like, running some things like that, right?
Yeah.
Like you would want to schedule those things, right?
Yeah, I'd never thought that you could slice it and dice it like that. That's awesome.
It's very cool. We have another question here. Is there any tutorial where I can learn Kubernetes from scratch? Another shameless plug. Chris Short just put this awesome thing. It was basically like a README for that. If we can put that link up as well, and it basically puts all of the books out there that kind of like the illustrated guide, like the children's guide to Kubernetes the hard way, up and running, like all of those in one central place. And I just love that he did that, because it shows just like, again, from somebody from start jumping through this, I always have to provide those links. Hey, you're thinking about it, versus now I could just have one place to be like, go. Thoughts, panel?
Is that on his blog? I'll find it.
At KubernetesReadme.com, was it?
Yeah, and then he has DevOps README as well that he just did. I also want to highlight the awesome Kubernetes list, which I just linked in the chat as well. That was kind of my go-to in terms of like, all right, I'm doing this thing. What's available to me? What's out there? But it also has great resources for learning and doing other things as well, exams, whatever it might be. So
it looks like, yeah, so Mario, you put your awesome resources there. There's somebody for Yogi put Cube Academy. Again, really awesome, really good work there.
Yeah, it's never been a better time to be learning Kubernetes. There's so much good stuff out there.
Yeah. Chauncey, you have any thoughts on it?
Yes, I posted in the Kubernetes the hard way. I think that starting there, or starting with that pattern, building the compute and all of the components, give one very good insight into how Kubernetes is put together, as well as put you in a good position of learning how to debug, because you kind of like have pieced together the infrastructure.
How about you, Chris?
I'm just dropping a few things in there. So when I first started learning Intro to Kubernetes on edX was really good. It's free and it's a prelude to the paid course. So it gives you a high level view of all the objects. For installation, when I was studying for my CKA, I went through the building a single cluster tutorial on the Kubernetes website, and that was super helpful, just getting started with kubeadm, bootstrapping a cluster. And then I'm going to find a link. They also had a companion doc for Kubernetes tasks, so it walks you through debugging, how to fix things, deploy things. Those are really good. And Kubernetes the hard way, if you want to really dig deep and do that Linux from scratch approach, is awesome.
Also, don't forget the concepts and tutorials on Kubernetes.io. Those are very good.
For sure.
Shout out to the Kubernetes docs team. They're amazing.
That's how I learned. I just went in the docs and I did kubeadmin.
Yeah, I think we
node.
all
Yeah.
hard way and kubeadmin, spinning up a cluster. I think these days it's even more approachable. Again, you can spin up a K3s, Minikube, Kind, microkates, and get things up. But again, that what Chauncey suggested, where you understand those bits through the hard way. Hey, take a node, install basically the kube proxy, kube APIs, put the certs in place, so you understand how all of these pieces all interact from the top node and the worker nodes, those types of things. It's an invaluable experience.
Yeah, I think it's also important to recognize that there are two different types of people that are going to want to learn Kubernetes: people that want to be operating Kubernetes and people that just want to consume Kubernetes. And we have to, resources for that. I always reference katacoda.com/Kubernetes. I like interactive learning, and with their setup and their scenarios that you can walk through. A really good way to learn how to use Kubernetes as a developer rather than the operational side.
Looks like there's some suggestions in the channel as well. I mean, obviously, Chris, you put some, things on like edX. It looks like Pavel, Kubernetes in Action by Marco. It's a Manning book. You also put another thing in terms of just the Kubernetes docs, Chris. Rocco talked about the Cat Coda, and then I put the link for Chris's README.
Got a Linux Foundation free training there.
Yeah, there you go.
I didn't know that course was free.
I recommend Kind also. Kind gives you a conformant Kubernetes cluster that has been installed via kubeadmin, and you can jump into each of those pods and understand how it was put together and all that, and actually interact with the components, the API server, controller, and all that.
Yep.
So that advice is just play with Kind. That's what I'll put in the notes. Play with Kind.
Yes, it's very yeah.
Kind of
another course I found was helpful if you want to do the Kelsey Hightower combo. He's got there's a Udacity course, which is great for intro to Kubernetes, and Kelsey is one of the instructors on there, and then jump into the hard way.
I looked at the hard way. It looks like he hasn't updated it in a while, being 2 releases ago. But
oh man, 2 releases.
1.18.
You should totally flame him on Twitter with that one, George.
We're not changing our releases that much anymore, right?
What, no love for us anymore, Kelsey?
Yeah.
I will paraphrase what Tim St. Clair says. I cannot wait for that thing to go away so we can get people using Kind and kubeadmin.
Puya joined us. Hey, George, look, Puya just joined us.
Yeah, you missed a giant swing. Shout out. Yeah.
Got off my other meeting early.
Yeah, I tell you what, doing it the hard way was important once. So if you are a developer, like, you don't need to know a lot of the stuff in there. Don't let that scare. I just wanted to put that out there. the tooling since the hard way came out has just improved so much. You might find yourself, like, if you're old, you used to like compile your own Linux kernels, and then at some point you just use your distro kernel and you haven't had to care about kernels in a long time. It's similar to that usually, unless you really, really need to go in there. Then having those skills, and let's say you're a cluster administrator, absolutely you should know those things. But for most of you, if you're just consuming, do the hard way once, and you'll appreciate how much the tooling has gotten better.
Hey,
I was just going to say
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Pop. Oh, no, I was just going to say the hard way is fantastic. The fundamentals is really important. If you're coming from a sysadmin background, an operations background, a DevOps background, do that. I actually found this Kubernetes patterns book, which just came out relatively recently, is actually good for developers. So at StockX, a lot of developers are like, what are flows? What are scenarios? What are some of the key patterns that I need to know when I'm debugging my application or when I'm deploying something, or the long-term or scaling or whatever it is? And patterns gives a really good way of thinking about approaching some of these problems. And gets into how to handle them. It could be with deployments, right? Or how replica sets are actually working behind the scenes. And it doesn't get too dense, but it also gives kind of a good high level of, here's what you need to understand to do what you're trying to do. And then for people that are a little bit further, maybe best practices is good as well, in terms of keeping yourself kind of on task with some of the best things to be the best patterns from more of an operations standpoint. So these are both relatively recent books that I would definitely suggest. I've not actually gone through best practices yet, but if you've been using Kubernetes long enough, you probably don't need it. But of course, Kubernetes in Action, this is the original version. There's a new one he's working on right now. I think it's coming out later this year. We can put a link to that in the chat as well. You can actually get a early copy right now. So books, they're great.
Yeah. I just wanted to put a +1 in for
Can we actually... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just +1 for best practices. I just finished that, and there's nuggets in there that I had forgotten about or didn't know. So it's a great overview even for seasoned vets.
Yeah, and I just found the book that was referenced to Kubernetes patterns and pasted the PDF into the channel.
Yeah, Red Hat's giving everyone a free copy. I put that in the notes as well. Snag that for sure, folks.
Exactly.
Definitely. Hey, Puya, just because you're new in, you want any thoughts on this in terms of just somebody asked the question in terms of any tutorials where I can learn Kubernetes from scratch that helped you originally, and are things you could suggest now?
Yeah, definitely. I think the hard way is really good if you need to manage Kubernetes yourself. If you have some, like, even if you are in charge of, like, let's say, starting a cluster and keeping it up, because if something goes wrong, you need to know what it's about. Right? If you're on the user side, there is definitely better use of your time. Maybe even doing the CKAD or learning some of these basics, however you want. I mean, if you're a video person, maybe the Udacity courses are good. Katacoda was awesome, I think, because like hands-on, having actual exercises and doing them. But I would also employ everyone to go really deep on each of the concepts. Like, look at what is a pod actually? Why is it there? Why is it not just a container? Like understanding these concepts, or why there is a service and what you can do with it, that gives you a better state of mind of using them, like knowing that the service is an abstraction and they can use it in different ways. Like there was things that helped me a lot in the beginning, like actually understanding it, especially if you come from something like that is not Kubernetes, that is maybe plain Docker or non-Docker, let's say.
All righty. Hey, panel, is there anything else that's new and hot and you want to talk about? Like, because we're still waiting, we have some no questions at the moment, so it'd be cool to maybe just talk about things that you're excited about from technology and Kubernetes perspective.
The volume snapshots is a very cool pattern. I'm not exactly sure if any one of y'all have to take advantage of that, but in the environment that I work in, databases that are like 10 or 15 gig in size, we need to recreate lower environments from that. And importing it via just like a MySQL import took 20 plus minutes. And then once we had upgraded to Kubernetes 17 dot something, volume snapshots came available, and now we're reduced that down to like less than 5 minutes. So volume snapshots and potentially volume cloning or two if you need if you're in a developer's environment where, they're building out their environments from code pushes, etc.
Yeah, my favorite feature of the 120 release. In fact, I'll describe the scenario first, right? You're running some random application in your cluster. It's in a crash loop back off. You want to work out what's going wrong. You try to execute into the container with a shell, and there's no shell, right? We've all been there. As of 120, I think kube control debug went into beta, giving you the tools to either provide a like container with tooling like a shell that you can do stuff with, or creating a copy of that pod so that you can get in and do stuff as well too. So it just simplifies that whole, I need to get in it, and you're going to have to modify it, change the image, use Nix3, whatever. Now it's just a lot easier. So that's a new feature people should be checking out.
That's so important. That's so important. Especially like you should not have a shell in your container. Like training you and enabling you to actually not have the shell in there and not have the excuse, but I need to debug. It was like, that's the excuse. Like I need SSHD in there because I need to debug or something.
As the security person, like, that like is when I see somebody shelling into a pod, I cringe. I think like
it's one of those quality of life things though, right? It simplifies our lives a little. It makes the quality of our life working with these systems, work with distro lists or scratch containers, just that little bit simpler when we need them. And I think that, and hopefully it will encourage us to use better, safer security practices. Definitely.
Actually, I feel like that's based on the environment. The environment that I work on, where developers need to debug their code, etc., we allow them to kube exec into their pods. We just disable the service account so that it's unable to be mounted, and that removes their Kubernetes access as far as interacting with that, and just don't run it in privilege mode. But there's times when a developer needs to get in and tell the logs for their Drupal app or something like that. So it's on a case by case.
Yeah, so here's a question. So in terms of splitting things up into a dev environment versus prod, are people okay having that access in dev, but kind of hardlining in prod, saying no SSH?
No SSH, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, like with kubectl debug, you can even remove that necessity in dev, because now you can maybe even have a really nice debug container that you're really fine with in dev. You has all your tooling, and you don't need to have those tools in your container. You have lightweight containers you can test very quickly, and you can still just with a debug command go in and do all your tails, do all the things that you need. But you don't leave the things open. And even, I mean, if I look at dev environments, most of them are open to the internet. They're not completely locked down. And I'm pretty scared of CVEs on dev environments, and I wouldn't leave them too far open, I'd say.
Before this feature, how would you have done it in the past? You'd have to recreate the thing and strace or dtrace after the fact, right? So, or you know what I'm saying? So this doing it inline in this method is really cool, right? So definitely props on that one. We have another question, you all, unless anybody has any other thoughts on the kubectl debug. The how to manage DNS, i.e. create, destroy subdomains in Route 53 for public facing applications running on EKS. And it looks like Yogi jumping in and just smashing with some amazing links here. He put Kubernetes SIG's external DNS, and he uses a simpler technique. He creates an ingress controller, gives an LB load balancing address, and then creates 2 routes. Again, that is one I've seen be effective every single time. So Yogi gets, if we had a fictitious t-shirt, eventually you get our love, and eventually we'd send you a t-shirt. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think both. I would actually, I think we do both most of the time, or at least we give both options to people. And then it depends a lot on like how strict are you in your organization about like giving access to zones, to DNS zones to people, and how are you okay with having an IAM account in your external DNS that is allowed to create the DNS entries. External DNS is really, really nice and quick. But sometimes people don't want to give that much access, or they might split up between Route 53 and Cloudflare, and then you want to have a bit more process in there involved, I would say.
I just want to give a nod to the gatekeeper team. They have a policy to make sure that you have unique ingresses. So I've used that pattern where you just have the star, and then you have people provisioning conflicting DNSs, and then pain ensues. So
shout out to the graduated project OPPA. Again, shout out to you all. Again, very, very awesome project that a lot of people have adopted quickly because of the ease of use and exactly for this scenario. It literally can hit API level scenarios, Kubernetes level policies. It's a really kind of Swiss Army knife of policies. So it's great.
Yeah, like I feel over the course of the years while we'll be doing the show, the number one answer we've given out is use OPPA. It feels like, yeah, looking back. I mean, there's just a lot of good stuff in there.
And it looks like the discussion's continuing again after you kind of gave Chris in that channel, you gave the OPPA suggestions here, but it looks like Kube2 IAM to use annotations, and then there's a question. So like they're still going through the motions there. But let's ask the panel of questions in terms of best practices around and any kind of suggestions from an OPPA perspective. I'd love to hear some things that you found recently with OPPA Gatekeeper that you'd like to share with folks.
Big one for me is they actually have a repo for the library, common libraries. So you don't have to write everything from scratch. Oops, wrong link. It's too far down. So one of the hardest parts for OPPA is writing your policies. These cover a good 80–90% of those common use cases, and then you can go in there and modify things. Yes, thanks, David. That play OPPA is awesome. Conf test is also really good for testing those policies. So you can drop that into a CI pipeline and start applying policies to your YAML before it even hits your cluster and whatever you're using, GitHub Actions or GitLab CI or whatever CI tool you're using. So that's those are really awesome.
Yeah, conf test is amazing. Great to hook into your own CI system and make sure you're testing things that way. And the Rego playground that Chris just mentioned too, like being able to just drop in your YAML from your Kubernetes deployment YAML, whatever, and then run your Rego rules against it and see what happens is invaluable. So props to the
Also,
playground.
they give examples, like, it's like Hello World. They have examples of different levels of policy. And I'll tell you, quite frankly, it's something that, like, we're emulating with Falco, without a doubt, because I think it's a fantastic way for somebody to kind of kick the tires, be able to figure out, like, okay, will this policy work? I need to understand the machinations of it, because it's a modular thing, right? It's like, okay, like, what are the things that I'm kind of rating this policy for? Shout out to you, Torin and team.
Has any one of you seen more examples around the mutation use cases? Because like I'm seeing a lot of use cases in validation, and they're great, and a lot of people are and they're super useful. But on the mutation side, I see very low beyond kind of add this label if it comes from a team. Or has anyone seen like interesting mutation use cases out there, or like examples? Because it's really hard to implement mutation too, with like JSON patches and all these things.
Yeah, I'm finding a video for you right now. There was, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he did a talk at the last KubeCon about how they're using mutation, but they're using the older version of Gatekeeper because the new one doesn't support mutation yet. And it runs through some of the pitfalls of doing mutation. So
yeah,
I'll dig that.
That's kind of what attracted me to Caverno. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Caverno does.
Yeah, it does the mutation. Yeah. I actually feel as though that OPPA Gatekeeper and Caverno is going to be competing, and Caverno may kind of win out because you don't have to learn a new language or to implement your policies. You stay the Kubernetes way.
How do we spell that? I'm trying to look it up for the note.
KYVERNO.
Yeah.
And
a channel. No, it's KYVERNO.
I know. Okay.
Yeah.
Caverno.
And there's actually a channel in the Kubernetes environment.
Found it. Okay.
They had a CNCF webinar recently, I think, or somewhere they were presenting recently. That was really nice. The video.
I think Rawcode's doing something today with them, right? Is it
tomorrow?
today or
I just dropped
tomorrow?
the link into the chat.
Nice.
So we're doing a live stream where we deploy, get started, run some policies. So worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm very
'Cause
interested
I
in the
tried to
sidecar
write
pattern.
some mutation in Rego, and it was really hard. And then once I got it, I tested it, and it was good. And in the demo, it failed. So I was like, am I dumb or something?
It is tricky. I remember doing that with the first version of Gatekeeper. Sometimes they're using a config map for the policies, right? And it just would sync in time, and then you get these weird false positives, and it required a lot of tinkering. Even if your unit tests for your Rego worked, it wouldn't necessarily. It's weird.
Chauncey, you were saying something?
Yep.
Oh no, I didn't say anything. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So in the channel, looks like Yogi put mutation equals service account equals none. So that's kind of some suggestions there. Brian said he's doing a handful of mutations that he can't share. Oh, Brian. Rawcode put the link to the stream he's doing this week with Caverno. Brian came back with mutate the repos for different clusters, mutate security context, mutate volumes. Bala put a link on admission controller webhooks, and it looks like again, Allison put the Regal Playground as well as another link to Open Policy Agent that's on the for Kubernetes in their Git page.
And I have it in the notes.
All righty, we're looking at 4 minutes left here. Do we have time for one more question, do you think, or that's it?
We do. Anyone have an easy one? Since we don't have t-shirts to give away, we've saved a lot of time.
Looks like somebody's typing.
Yeah, if not, you can just scroll to the bottom there to the outro notes.
Yeah, I got it. Yep.
Go.
So you want me to do it?
Yeah, you got one more. Let's try it.
Okay. Is there? Oh, I'm sorry. So in terms of, you want to do the outro? Because no, it looks like there's one more question.
Yeah,
Multi-cluster service discovery between EKS and bare metal. Currently running console, we have found some undesirable behavior with health checking while using catalog sync. Do we have a preferred native solution that are simple, while no more complicated than console, that doesn't involve using headless services and then losing balancing like core DNS Kubernetes? Meta. Is that one we can cover in 3 minutes?
That is tough.
That was tough.
Yeah.
That was tough, period.
I'm interested if this person tried console, because that was kind of going to be my go-to. I'm wondering if something like what's the Anthos equivalent on AWS can do this natively a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know.
I think what Google is trying is getting the Google DNS into your clusters, and then by that having your service discovery native through DNS. Otherwise, console is what I've seen most in those use cases, but they seem to have already hit some health check problems there. And then there is like the full-on service mesh Istio answer to these things, where you would mesh the whole networks.
Oh, that's a good question from Yogi as well.
Yeah, 30 seconds. What channels do you monitor for your Kubernetes and ecosystems news? And then outro it.
Yep.
Cube Weekly email for me, mostly. And George.
Twitter, Cube Weekly, and DevOps-ish.
Pui is
being also used
the same as me.
All righty, let's go for the outro now. So
wait, I've got one more. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
GitHub.com/Kubernetes/enhancements. Thank me later.
Caps. All right. Anyway,
Read the caps.
Thanks to the following companies for supporting the community with developer volunteers. We have Giant Swarm, Phase 2, Weaveworks, VMware, Red Hat, Equinix, Google, Microsoft, Sysdig, Utility Warehouse. Special thanks for the CNCF for sponsoring the t-shirt giveaway that will be back. We will have t-shirts soon. So thank you all to the panelists. And lastly, feel free to hang out in the office hours channel afterwards. The other channels too busy for you, and we're looking for a friendly home. You're more than welcome to pull a chair and hang out. We're so glad you all were so interactive today. We really it was a pleasure. So panel, any last words?
Nope. Stick around after.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Have a good day.